Hi, this is your host, Sharon Hill. No critics, just politics. We're going to pick up where we left off last time, and this week we're going to be discussing Aristotle. Remember, we're talking about political philosophy. Aristotle, who was a pupil in the Academy of Plato, remarked that all the writings of Plato are original. They show ingenuity, novelty of view, and spirit of inquietude. But perfection in everything is perhaps a difficult thing. Aristotle was a scientist rather than a prophet, and in his Prophets, written while he was teaching at the Lyceum at Athens, is only part of an encyclopedic account of nature and society in which he analyzes society as if he was a doctor and prescribes remedies for its ills. Political behavior is here regarded as a branch of biology as well as of ethics. In contrast to Plato, Aristotle was an empirical political philosopher. He criticized many of Plato's ideals as impractical, but like Plato, he admired balance and moderation and aimed at harmonious cities under the rule of law. The book is composed of lecture notes and is arranged in a somewhat confusing way, a quarry of arguments and definitions of great value, but hard to master. The first book, though probably the last written, is a general introduction. Books 2, 3, 7 through 8, probably the earliest, dealt with the ideal state, and books 4 and 7 through 7 analyze actual states and politics. Now, the treatise is thus, in modern times, a mixture of political philosophy and political science. Now, like Plato, Aristotle thinks in terms of city-state, which he regards as the natural form of civilized life, social and political, and the best medium in which human capacities can be realized. Hence, his famous definition of man as a political animal, distinguished from other animals by his gift of speech and power of moral judgment. Man, when perfected, he writes, is the best of animals, but when separated from law and justice, he is the worst of all. Since armed injustice is the most dangerous, and he is equipped at birth with the arms of intelligence and wit, moral qualities which he may use for the worst ends. Since all nature is pervaded by purpose, and since humans aim at the good, the city and state, which is the highest form of human community, aims at the highest good, like sailors with their separate functions who yet have a common object in safety and navigation. Citizens too have a common aim in modern time: survival, security, and the enhancement of the quality of life. In the contents of the city-state, this high quality of life can be realized only by a minority, and Aristotle, like Plato, exclude those who are not full citizens or who are slaves. Indeed, he says that some men are slaves by nature and deserve their status. Plato and Aristotle aimed at an aristocratical and exacting way of life, reflecting in more sophisticated forms the ideals of the warrior depicted by Homer. Having stated that the aim of the city-state is to promote good life, Aristotle insists that it can be only achieved under the rule of law. Now, the rule of law is preferable to that of a single citizen. If it is the better course to have individuals ruling, they should be made law guardians or ministers of law. The rule of law is better than even the best of men, for he who bids law rule may be deemed to bid God, and reason alone rule. But he who bids men rule as the element of the beast. For the desire is a wild beast, and passion perverts the minds of ruler, even if they are the best of men. Now, this doctrine, which distinguishes between lawful government and tyranny, survived the Middle Ages, and by subjecting the ruler to law, became the theoretical sanction of modern constitutional government. Aristotle auto vindicates the rule of custom and justifies the obligation accepted by members of society. The solidarity man, he writes, is either a beast or a god. This outlook at once reflects the respect for custom and solidarity that has promoted survival in primitive tribal societies, even at the price of sacrificing individual, and gives a theoretical justification for the acceptance of political obligation. Now, like Aristotle analyzes the different kinds of steady states, while states are bound like animals to be different, he considers a balanced mixed constitution the best. It reflects the ideal of justice and fair dealing, which gives every individual his due in a conservative social order in which citizens of the middle condition predominate, and he attacks the democracy, the oligarchy, and the tyranny. Under democracy, he argues demagogues attain power by bribing the electoral and waste accumulated wealth. But it is tyranny that Aristotle most detests. The arbitrary power of an individual above the law is responsible to no one and who governs all alike, with a view to his own advantage and not of his subjects, therefore against their will. No free man can endure such a government. The politics contains not only a firm statement of these principles, but also a penetrating analysis of how city-states are governed, as well as the causes of revolution in which inferiors revolt in order that they may be equal, and equals that they may be superior. The treatise concludes with an elaborate plan for educating the citizens to obtain the mean, the possible, and the becoming. The first implies a balanced development of body and mind, ability and imagination. The second, the recognition of the limits of mind and the range and the limitations of talent. The third, an outcome of the other two, is the style and self-assurance that come from the resulting self-control and competence. Now, while therefore Aristotle accepts a conservative and hierarchical social order, he states firmly that public power should aim at promoting the good life, and that only through the rule of law and justice can the good life be attained. These principles were novel in the context of his time, when the great extra-European civilizations were ruled, justly or unjustly, by the arbitrary power of semi-divine rulers, and when other peoples, though respecting tribal customs and the authority of tribal elders, were increasingly organized under war leaders for depredation. Now, that ends it as far as Aristotle's philosophy of thinking. I'm now going to move into Sirius, and we're going to have a little short discussion on that. Now, both Plato and Aristotle had thought in terms of the city-state, but Aristotle's pupil, Alexander the Great, he swamped the cities of old Greece and brought them into a vast empire that included Egypt, Persia, and Levant. Although city-states remained the locus of the civilization of antiquity, they became part of an imperial power that broke up into kingdoms under Alexander's successors. This imperial power was reexerted on an even greater scale by Rome, whose empire at its greatest extent reached from central Scotland to the Euphrates and from Spain to eastern Anatolia. Civilization itself became identified with empire, and the development of the Eastern and Western Europe was conditioned by it. Now, since the city-state was no longer self-sufficient, universal philosophies developed that gave people something to live by on a wider way of life. Of these philosophies, Stoicism was the most influential. The former inspired a rather grim self-sufficiency and sense of duty, as amplified by the writings of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the latter a prudent withdrawal from the world of affairs. This setting for the political philosophy thus became much wider, relating individuals to universal empire, thought of as in China, as contemporaneous with civilization itself. Its inspiration remained Hellenic, but derivative Roman philosophers reinterpreted it, and Roman logists enclosed the old concepts of political justice in a corpus of legal definitions capable of surviving their civilization decline.